Good evening, everyone. Happy March. Welcome to a meeting of the Hunterdon Central Regional High School Board of Education. Please be advised that this and all meetings of the board are open to the public and media, consistent with the Open Publics Meeting Act, NJSA 10:4-6, and that advance notice required therein has been provided. Meeting notice was also posted in the boardroom of the Upper School campus, sent to the Courier News, Star Ledger, Express Times, and the Hunterdon County Democrat, and sent to the clerks of Delaware Township, East Amwell Township, Flemington Borough, Raritan Township, and Reddington Township. The public will have an opportunity to be heard as shown on the agenda. May I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Bloodfeld?
Here.
Mr. Davidson?
Here.
Mrs. Duggan?
Here.
Mr. Fowler?
Here.
Mrs. Hughes?
Here.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Here.
Mrs. O'Donnell? Mrs. Peterson?
Here.
And Mr. Reimar?
Here.
Thank you. Would you please rise for the flag salute, which is behind us. Oh, they moved. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Mr. Reimar, would you like to read our district mission statement from the agenda? Yes. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. It's on the second page of the agenda. Yeah, no worries. Second page of the agenda. Yep, right after the flag salute, number 4.
Hunterdon Central is an innovative educational community dedicated to the intellectual, social, and emotional safety and growth of all students. While fostering curiosity and promoting wellness, we aspire to create powerful learning experiences, establish strong partnerships, and serve as contributing members of society.
Thank you. Okay, we have 2 items of correspondence, which are noted on the agenda. And with that, we'll move right into Dr. Moore's superintendent report.
Did we skip the minutes?
Oh, we have minutes to move. Number 5.
That's not on my copy. Okay. No. Can I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes from
January
the
23rd.
January 23rd meeting, please?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Bloodfield?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan?
Yes.
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Is it on that copy?
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
It's on this one.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
And Mr. Reimar?
Yes. Sorry, abstain. I was absent.
Thank you. Motion carried?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out to me. It wasn't on my copy of the agenda. Okay, we did correspondence, and then we will move right into Dr. Moore's report.
Thank you. A lot of thoughts to share tonight. We don't have a presentation tonight, so we'll move pretty quickly. But some thoughts, some events, some ideas to share with you tonight, and a lot of gratitude. So I'm grateful tonight to have Laurel Hanrahan, and I'm grateful tonight to have Raina Tyler here with us to present 2 different student council reports to you. So Laurel's going to step up to the microphone now and give us the monthly student council report that you're used to getting. Laurel, all yours.
Good evening. My name is Laurel Hanrahan. I'm a senior here at Central, and I do have a lot to report on, so please bear with me. So this past February, the Student Council began planning their spring event, Senior Central. There's 14 senior participants who have been nominated by their coaches and advisors as great representatives of their activity. This charity event raises money for the Drew O'Donoghue Fund and is on April 28th at 7 p.m. Tickets are $10. On February 10th, the class of 2023 and 2025 joined forces to hold a wing bowl during unit lunch. This fan-favorite event raised money for the Make-A-Wish Foundation. In addition to those efforts in the Wing Bowl, the class of 2023 held an online Gertrude Hawk chocolate fundraiser that ended today. Orders will arrive just in time for the spring break and Easter holiday. Last Thursday, the Black Student Union had a basketball fundraiser for all students and staff members to participate, along with their Black History Month campaign on the morning announcements. On February 16th, there was a student showcase at Back to School Night. This event showcased the amazing things that our many clubs do each day. On February 22nd, nominated students met with Prevention Resources during lunch to plan May efforts to celebrate and recognize Mental Health Awareness Month. On February 24th, our school held a sportsmanship summit for athletes and coaches in the Skyline Conference to learn more about the defining principles of leadership. And yesterday, Katarina Hoffman took first place and Gianna Lawrence took second at the New Jersey Girls Diving State Championship. Looking ahead to March, starting tomorrow is Cinderella, our school musical. Tickets are $15, and for more information, you can visit the school website. On March 9th, students receiving the Seal of Biliteracy will celebrate at World Language Night at 6:30 in the auditorium. On Mondays, the Intramural Club will meet in the new wooden gym for games such as basketball, volleyball, soccer, kickball, and more. And last, both proms are underway. Junior prom will take place on May 5th at the Fuge, and senior prom will be on June 9th at the Steel Stacks. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurel.
Thanks, Laurel.
Thank you so much. Now, Raina is here to give us a report on the work that we've been doing for creating this student representation to the Board of Ed. And that's been an ongoing project. Raina's been important with her friends in that project with a couple of our staff members. Mrs. Hughes has been present for much of that. And we have an important meeting. Well, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah.
I'll leave it to you.
Okay.
Go ahead, fill us in.
Hi, I'm Raina Tyler. I am the senior class president. Laurel is my VP, and we have been working a lot with Dr. Moore and the rest of the administration and class council representatives of all grades to create a kind of mini board for the Board of Ed as per the new New Jersey law. So we are happy to be back, and I'm happy to kind of give you some updates on that. And hit the ground running with this creation. So, of course, we had our last meeting was a few weeks ago. We planned to have one this Tuesday, but due to the delayed opening, it was canceled. And the next one is March 9th. But from that past meeting, Dr. Moore came in with this unique idea that everyone was pretty excited about, and we're kind of building off of that. That idea is kind of to get as many voices heard as possible, is grouping the kind of clubs and interests into sectors and then getting representatives through that system. So all viewpoints and experience at Hunterdon Central will be represented. Although we've made some progress with these ideas, we're looking forward to kind of using these next meetings to implement them. As for the types of students, to make sure like all viewpoints are in this and nothing's being left out of the equation. Our past meetings have kind of just been full discussions of, well, who's still being left out? Are the underclassmen views represented? Are the kids that can't make it to clubs represented? And that's something that we're definitely talking with now. An idea that I was just talking with Dr. Moore on one day last week was kind of almost, I like this setting a lot with kind of opening the IMC up during like a unit lunch and having kids be able to voice their opinion to whoever is elected to that student board that will then work with you guys. And just kind of work that way. I think it's definitely still in the works, but our goal now is to kind of hit the ground running, get a structure in place, and then kind of make more tweaks once something is now in place. So if anyone has any questions about any of that. Yeah.
One question, how many students do you see being on this?
Well, we were talking about like 6-ish sectors, so we were hoping about 6 representatives. However, that's definitely something that I wrote down here that it's not exactly finalized, and we're hoping to on the next meeting in March 9th, and then I'm excited to give you an update on that.
Excellent.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks, Raina. And remember, the goal here, and we talked about this in our summer retreat as well. How do we do something beyond just the mere sort of requirement of having a student or two present information to us. That's really valuable. That's been incredible for you to hear from our student council. We've been doing that for a long time. But how do we move that toward bringing voice up to you from the student body so that you can really get a sense of what it is that they're chewing on, what are they thinking about, what are they asking for? How do we bring you into those conversations? We've had a lot of great practice in some of the policy and other projects we've had where board members have been involved with our students in building those things. And so our students are something I'm very thankful for today. There's a lot of gratitude today, despite some weather business yesterday. And I like to think about the mission moment. And Mr. Reimar read our mission statement. I like to think about what can I share with you tonight that really illustrates our mission. And there are a few quick things that have me feeling blessed to be working with really so many talented and passionate people here. Day in and day out, they give their all. And I'm not talking about the big, grand strategic projects. I'm talking about just the work that they do day in and day out in their classrooms, in their offices, in the hallways, wherever it is, at their desks that they're situated. So a couple of events, and a lot of them happened in here, so I'm sort of basking in some of the air of them. We had an event, we helped with an event last week on, I believe it was Thursday night. We had the HCEA Anti-Racism Committee here held an event, their annual book study kickoff. But this year we worked closely with them to provide some more space to help imagine how we could bring in some community partners to really build a conversation with staff and parents and community members who were present to focus on equity, to focus on empathy, to focus on compassion. And the book, again, Alan Gratz's Refugee was the book. It's a book that a lot of our community members are familiar with and a lot of our students have read in middle school, but it's a good read no matter how old you are. Now, we had over 50 people here when you talk about staff, students, community members, community partners. Here, and what we were able to do was hear from various members of our community who shared their own refugee experiences. And it was just an amazing evening of hearing about the world through other eyes. Now, I want to focus particularly, I want to highlight Daniel Gary-Fullen, who is a student here, but who is a refugee from Ukraine. And he presented that night on his experiences of traveling through several countries before he was able to arrive here at Hunterdon Central. And we were really just fortunate and blessed to be able to learn from him that night, and every day fortunate that he's with us to learn from us. It's just powerful, powerful stuff. The next day, up in the auditorium, and Mrs. Hughes was here for this, Mr. Spencer hosted a summit of student athletes from across our conference. So we had 10 schools represented with students from our Skyland conference. They heard a compelling talk from a speaker, John Paul Gonzalez, and then they worked in breakout groups to discuss and surface ideas for what will become the spectator code of conduct that we've talked about. And I have to share that as Mr. Spencer began to work on this idea with his colleagues across the conference, everyone looked at that and said, we need that. We need that. And so the participation and the energy in the room as these students cooperated, these students who are used to competing cooperated, was just immensely powerful. And very powerful for them to talk about and hear them talk about what they need from their peers who are in the stands in order to be the best representatives for their school that they can be. It was powerful moment. Now today, also in this space again today, we had a wonderful lunch gathering. We had about 40 students and 15 staff members for lunch to honor them being nominated and chosen as our staff and student all-stars. I say Mr. Brandt, Mr. Estrada organized that with, Mrs. Rocha was involved today, Mrs. Graham, Mrs. Drong, to put that all together. And just an amazing, really, like all walks of life group of kids. And what brings them together, and with the staff who were recognized as well today, they get a pin, they get a certificate, like a refrigerator certificate. They, I don't know, I can't say that they do extraordinary things, but they do incredibly telling things about what it means to be a supportive and contributing member of our community. And so many of the students in particular who are nominated by their teachers come into that group, and I've said this before, come into that group as people who've helped somebody in a really deep and powerful way. And it was just a wonderful feeling. So there's a lot of that in my thinking and reflection right now tonight. And it's a reminder to really relish the good, to really relish the good. And I've talked quite a bit about what keeps me up at night over the years, but I haven't talked nearly enough about what I put my head on the pillow with. And it's the gratitude and the relish over those sorts of things that, that we turn to, that I turn to in thinking about all that. So many wonderful people, and Mr. Brandt tells me this all the time when I get impatient, when I get frustrated, Mr. Brandt, Jeff, wonderful people are doing wonderful things, day in and day out. And so that's what we've been thinking about really this week. Now, it turns us from being reactive to proactive. That's one of the sort of actionable realizations that we take from gratitude, is we have a lot that we can build from, and it's not always about reacting to things. And I think in our profession we've gotten in a really bad situation, and there's almost sort of neural pathways built around reacting to crises. And that's been our profession over the past several years, and certainly doesn't seem to be letting up. But I come back to remembering that, it's the board that's been instructive to us on turning reactive to proactive. And I go back to our care policy from last year. The board was responding to concerns, and it's right there in the policy. And I'll read just a quick snippet. Hunterdon Central Regional High School District recognizes that inequity exists in our school community as a result of historical patterns of bias, and that this inequity expresses itself through disproportionalities in opportunity, access, participation, achievement, discipline, and belonging. And it's all right there for us. Here are the areas in which you need to work to address concerns. But the next statement is a beautiful vision, and it's where we go from reactive to proactive in a really instructive and insightful and beautiful way. Each student will grow through the promises of our mission. And all students belong for who they are. And I'm going to say that again just so that it kind of hangs in the air here, flowing out from the mission that Mr. Reimar read. Each student will grow through the promises of our mission, and all students will belong for who they are. And we end that paragraph with each means every and all means all. Nobody left behind in that, and that's critical to us. Now, I'll close this little bit of a reflection by coming back again to some concerns. Many of the problems in that first paragraph summed it up well. Many of the problems that stand in our way are systemic. I think when the policy talks about historic patterns, it's talking about systemic things that are difficult to overcome. We can say and do many, many great things, but the systemic things, the patterns seem like really tall barriers to overcome, and that's discouraging. Those are the keep me up at night things, right? But what we go into it with as far as resource is just incredible. And, as I said before, American public schools are called to do a thing that is more proactive and is more optimistic than just respond to crises and react to problems. We're called to prepare students to solve tomorrow's problems. And though that's frustrating in its vagueness, I also have to say it's also frustrating for a district that only gets 4 years with its students. It still is a beautiful thing for us to base our work on. And it's this realization that our work really is to bring the past into the present and prepare for the future, that's our work. And it's a gift, terribly difficult work, but it's a gift to do that work. It does lead to hard and uncomfortable conversations and understandings, difficult work. But it's optimistic, it's forward-looking, and again, the board reminds us through its policies that it ought to be proactive instead of reactive. So thank you, and I'm thanking you for others as well. Thank you for the opportunity to do that work, and thank you for your leadership in providing proactive rather than reactive direction for all of us. We have a system not only to fix, but to build. But at Central, remarkable number of remarkably skilled people day in and day out. So I truly and deeply appreciate that. Some more simpler process things. I'll switch gears pretty abruptly here. We are working on our 2023-2024 calendar. And I frustrate my colleagues in the K-8s because we tend to be later on that than they are. They've gotten their calendars out, and I know it frustrates the community. And we have drafts that we can begin to share, and I'll begin sharing with you some drafts. We, and particularly in Student Life and Program next month. Let's see, we are weighing a couple of questions about how we honor various holidays for the different faith communities in our region. And it looks as though that we'll be able to achieve one of the things that's very difficult to achieve, which is a combined professional development day with all of our K-8s. So we're looking at that Friday, March 15th as the potential for a combined professional or common professional development day, which will give us all a really interesting opportunity to work together on some common themes. A quick reflection on the weather. We had our first taste of weather yesterday. I can't believe it took this long, but I'm a little worried about, there are those years that you get smacked in March, and this could be maybe one of those years, but we were able to get away the other day with a delayed opening. So that was good. And just a reminder, a day that begins like that begins very early. And I've shared some thoughts with the board, but I just want to make sure I share with the community as I have this moment right now. We get up very early, often before 4 a.m. to begin to gather information about what's going on. We're in touch with a lot of people, emergency management, law enforcement, our partner K-8s, and other schools throughout the county. An awful lot comes to life in the 4 to 4:30 range there as we gather all the information. We have a weather service that we work with to get up to the minute forecasting. And then by 4:30, we're trying to finalize a decision. Your transportation folks are out on the road, checking roads, so I'm getting calls from all different corners. And we try to wrap that up as quickly and as early as we can because it's not just the machinery of the school day starting. People are coming from far away in some cases to get to work here. It's also that lunches start to be prepared. Bus drivers, who are the first ones, our operations folks, who are the first ones to try to make sense of whatever's going to happen that day. They need fair warning to turn around if we're concerned about the conditions. And that was a day where a delayed opening worked for us. Now, we are aware, and I want to share that we're working on a potential issue with our school messenger system. This is the system that automatically texts, automatically calls when we have an issue. We have been hearing from some folks that not everybody received the call or they received it later, that not everyone necessarily received the text message, so we're looking into that. Mr. Roberto and folks are looking into that pretty deeply. But in the meantime, we do urge everyone to update their preferences in the school messenger platform, and there are instructions for that on our website. Mrs. Tucker sent some information out about that to the community the other day. The emails flow well, but we were having some trouble with phone calls and text messages from that school messenger platform the other day. So we're working on that. Cinderella, she mentioned Cinderella. Rogers and Hammerstein, Cinderella had a soft opening today with a performance that we provide each year for senior citizens in our community. And as someone who's, I guess, reflecting on the fact that he just received his AARP card the other day, I'm going to say that I'm attending tomorrow night's opening performance. They have a performance at 7 p.m. tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Friday, and then 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. on Saturday. We are tracking weather for Friday night, another weather system coming our way, and so if we need to make any adjustment, likely that Friday performance would move to Sunday. So we're gearing up for that potential. Let's see. On the agenda, we have our HIB and suspension report. I do want to point out there's a new column there, resolved through preliminary determination. You see a number 3 there. The latest version of the policy that we've adopted allows for the principal to make a preliminary determination on whether or not an incident constitutes a potential violation or a potential labeling of HIB under the statutory, under the requirements in our policy. So we had 3 such incidents that crossed our desks that were determined unnecessary to go into investigation. And so those don't come to you in the same way that others that you're used to hearing, and we'll talk more about that in the future. Also, our suspension report, and we'll be adding in some in-school suspensions. We've had some in-school suspensions going on under a pilot program, and that's going to continue to expand as we move into the spring. So that column was added a little while ago, but we haven't done much quite in there yet. I think it was at the last meeting that you all appointed some staff members to work on developing that program. Let's see, do we have organizational items? You have two HIB, a motion to affirm two HIB decisions. We have second read policies, and that's all. So thank you, Mrs. Hughes, and thank you, everyone, for the time. Oh, yes, thank you, yes. We do have, on our Student Life and Program Committee, we were discussing the board adopting a resolution that Mr. Roberto has handed out and put over there and given you each a copy of. This resolution appears in the Student Life and Program agenda for your adoption tonight. And we can talk in more detail about what it is, how it comes to us in this way, and acknowledge Mrs. Peterson's help with all of that. But I wanted to mention, I want to make sure I pointed out to you that this is over there. It's on the tables here. You should all have a copy of it in the audience. And it is on our website agenda as well. It just didn't make it into the printing of your desk copy agendas. So we'll talk more about that when we get to Student Life and Program.
Thank you. Before we move into the first residence forum, I just want to speak briefly about the athletic summit last Friday that Dr. Moore referenced, that I had the pleasure and privilege of being present for. What amazing work. Laurel, who has left the room but spoke on behalf of Student Council, was there. About 10 or a dozen of our student athletes. I think there was about a dozen schools in the Skyland Conference, I think about 50%, which I think is an amazing number for a pilot program to have showed up. There were ADs from 10 or 12 different schools in our conference. There was I don't want to get his title wrong, president of the Skyland Conference, who had retired and has now come back to be the president of the Skyland Conference. Just amazing stuff. The work that Jesse Spencer did, the board is very grateful for the time and effort he put into putting together that. But just to see our student athletes being leaders in that way, being on the forefront and the cutting edge of this really amazing work, to not only focus on their physical athletic prowess, but also to develop themselves as whole human beings, young adults. Really good work. There was all sorts of contact information exchanged between athletes from different schools, which was really cool. The speaker, Mr. Gonzalez, was phenomenal, inspiring. I have never seen a group of teenagers so enraptured with somebody. There wasn't a phone out. There wasn't a giggle. There was just laser eyes on the speaker. He was amazing. He encouraged the students to reach out and exchange contact information, because he said sometimes you might be in a situation where you may not be able to go to your teammate or somebody in your school, but you may want advice from somebody at Pingree or North or Ridge. So that was really cool. We saw a lot of phones coming out in that moment and exchanging contact information. They broke out in small groups, as Dr. Moore mentioned, and they worked on a code of conduct for spectators. So really cool, really innovative work for our student athletes, and really proud to be a part of that. So I want to just make sure that Mr. Spencer gets, due acknowledgement for the work putting that together. With that, we'll move into our first residence forum for items that are on the agenda. 5 minutes. Anybody who has any comments for items on the agenda, you can come up to the mic, state your name and address.
We have 4 minutes on the timer.
Yes, we'll do 4 minutes on the timer with a 1-minute final dong. Okay. Seeing none, we will then move our organizational items. Can I have a motion to move HIB 15 and 16?
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Mrs. Blackfield?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson? Yes. Mrs. Dugan?
Yes.
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
And Mr. Reimer?
Abstain.
Abstain. Motion carries.
Thank you. Second items are the 3 policies on second read. 152 about board officers, just speaks to elections and ballots. Policy 161, call adjournment and cancellation, logistics of our board meetings. And 162 legal notices for our board meetings. Can I have a motion to move those 3 policies on second read?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, could I have a roll call vote, please?
Mrs. Blatfield?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dugan?
Yes.
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
And Mr. Reimer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move into committee reports. Mr. Davidson, would you like to start with student life, please?
Yes, we have an agenda.
Turn your mic on.
It's at the end.
At the end?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can speak to that in discussion, too.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So we have 5 items that are showing on the list for approval from the SLP committee, and I will run down them. The first thing we talked about was the tuition and transportation modification. This was Ms. Cancelosi-Hade gave us a rundown on that. It's just a modification. Okay, the second item that's on the agenda here are policy first readings. And you notice I'm going through these and telling you what they mean. I'll vote, create the motion to vote on them at the end of the list. The policies for first reading, there are 5 of them. And the committee's taken them up, but since the committee report, we've had suggestions for a change on 2425, emergency virtual and remote instruction program. So as we go through and I make the motions, or suggest the motions, I'm going to table, when I get to it, that motion to approve 2425. We'll approve the other 4 if the board wishes, but that one we want to send back to the committee to look at the next meeting at the revisions that were suggested. All right? Then we've got early graduation students, 1 that's met the requirements. We have overnight field trip for the Youth and Government State Conference, and that's normal. It's at Princeton Forest Hall. And finally, a grant we received to approve Gateway Success Grant of Service administered by the Progressive Center for Independent Living. So that makes 5. So I'm going to make a motion to approve.
Let's,
Oh,
And we have number
and
plus,
6.
right, number 6
plus
is the resolution.
the new resolution to the state regarding, well, it should be read. Do you want to read it?
We've all got it.
Okay.
We don't need to read it into the
Don't
record.
read it?
We've all got it, but I
Everybody's
can
seen
speak
it?
to it. Would you like me to speak to it, Mr. Davidson?
Go ahead.
So as part of Mr. Davidson's report, I'll offer that this resolution came to us from Mrs. Peterson, who brought it to the Student Life and Program Committee to consider as a statement that the board may want to make to urge the New Jersey School Boards Association to advocate to the state through the NJSBA's policy-making apparatus, to advocate to the state that they should back off on some of this testing, basically. In particular, we talked about the Start Strong testing, and we had a long discussion about the Start Strong testing at our last meeting or 2 ago, and we talked about comparing it with PSAT and how we had quite little faith in it. School boards entertains resolutions like this from districts to include in their policy manual, and they do that once a year. So we have an opportunity to advance these thoughts to school boards to put into their policy manual, and there's a deadline. There's a deadline of
March 9th.
March 9th. So this would be your opportunity to act on this and to take some of the things that we were talking about with the Start Strong assessment and enlist the support of school boards in advocating for some change there as well. There are lots of ways that a board can advocate for things. This is one, and it's a good one. We have seen local boards actually get their resolutions accepted and included in the school board's manual. So it's a good thing. And if there are any questions and discussion about it, certainly we can talk more.
Okay. So now I'd like to make a motion to approve items 1, item 2, policy, with the exception of policy 2425. I'd like to motion to approve item 3, 4, and 5. And finally, including the resolution
And-
to be submitted to the state.
Yeah, this is number 6.
That's number 6, right?
Yeah.
Yep, okay. Do we have a motion for those items in a second?
So moved.
Second.
Second. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just one quick point of information I think it would be proper to actually go through a motion to table that one
I'm
particular
going to do
policy.
that after
Afterwards,
we
got it.
approve
Good.
this,
Yeah.
which is without.
If nobody has any comments, I just want to also thank Mrs. Peterson for sort of spearheading
Yes,
this.
thank you.
Mrs. Cangelosi-Haight as well, who weighed in on the language for this, and we think it's in a good place. I agree with Dr. Moore and with Mrs. Peterson's efforts to bring this to the NJSBA. I think everybody's in agreement. Boards, parents, students, probably administrators, that we do too much state testing and we're losing a lot of classroom time. So appreciate everybody's efforts. This was teamwork on this in getting this done. So we will submit this to the NJSBA next week or by next week, and then they will go through their committees, subcommittees, legal committee, policy committee, whatever other committee they can come up with, and then they will adopt it or not adopt it, or they may reach out to us and say they like it, but they want to modify it. So there is a process. And we'll be notified once this is submitted.
Can I make a point?
Yeah, of course.
I was just going to say, there's actually a delegate assembly, and so that's probably where it'll be voted on. So if anybody is interested in following along with its progress, it will actually be, and that's something that I, as the NJSBA rep, will be
Yeah.
attending to go vote in person, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to have it heard.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
May 13th,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Excellent. Any other comments about the resolution or anything else in SLP? Okay. We have a motion and a second, I believe. We did?
Yes, you
Can I have a
should
roll
move.
call, please?
Mr. Davidson?
And Mr. Bluff,
Yes?
give Ms. Blufffield.
So the order on this?
Go ahead, sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Davidson, okay, you said yes. Right? Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. Blackfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Dugan?
Oh, I get it.
Yes. Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Reimer?
Yes.
Mr. Reimer, sorry. And Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to
Thank you.
table approval of the policy 2425, emergency virtual and remote instruction program, and have it sent to the SLP committee next meeting for review.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Davidson?
Yes?
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. Blackfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Dugan? Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Reimer?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you. Operations and Transportation, Mr. Fowler, please.
Thank you. Evening, everybody. So going through O&T activities, there's 11 action items. I'll run through them as efficiently as possible. First is to move approval of financial reports for the BA's office and the board secretary report, both ending December 31st of 2022. The next action item is a move to approve district invoices in the amount of $5,052,529.38. Bill list is attached. Third action is to move the approval of line account transfers. These are just typical BA transfers that are moving. Next one is a move to approve budget agenda objectives for 23-24 annual budget. I won't read them all unless you'd like me to, but we discussed them, and it's part of kicking off the budget process for the next year. Next one is move to accept donations from participants in the corporate sponsorship program. We have a number of participants that we're very grateful for in various levels of membership, and would like to extend our gratitude for all of those donations. Move to approve a joint transportation agreement for 22-23 school year with ESC. This is to move one student between Central and North Hunterdon High School for education purposes, And you can see there, the estimated total cost is $9,212.22. Next action item is to move, accept again with gratitude, donation of fabrics, laces, and remnants and samples for use in the district sewing classes valued at $2,900 from Mary Christoph of Fleming Decor.
Nice.
We have an action item to authorize architects, SSP architects, to provide architectural and engineering services. This is involved with the loop road repair after Ida storm damage. Cost of services is scheduled to be $40,700. Next, we have an action item to move and authorize the business administrator to solicit bids for upcoming capital projects. There's a list of 6 projects: paving the IMC parking lot, doing work on the 11-12 life skills room, a JV baseball field upgrade that was scheduled in prior years but pushed back due to scheduling issues, continuation of 9-10 corridor locker replacements or removals for nooks to sit in during lunch. The next project is a varsity softball field dugouts. And the last is a bridge and loop road repair, talked about in the last action item. And then we have a move to approve a resolution, and this is to allow the board secretary to execute a contract for assessment and counseling services with Ilya McAllister. This has got to do with substance abuse counseling, and it's a cost of $375 per evaluation. And finally, we do have an action to move to approve, authorize application and acceptance of a climate awareness education grant in the amount of approximately $6,500. So those are 11 action items that I'm looking to.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on O&T? Hearing none, can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Fowler?
Yes.
Mr. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan?
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg?
Yes.
Mrs. Bletfield?
Yes.
Mr. Reimer?
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Mrs. Bletfield, can you report on personnel, please?
Yes, personnel met on Tuesday, February 7th. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to read the minutes. I'm just going to go through this quickly. I'll point out a couple of things of interest. There are 17 items on the agenda for approval tonight. We have one resignation. We have a couple of contractual and per diem appointments. If you notice on the per diem appointments, the ski club chaperone at $50, that's $50 per event. We have a bunch of hourly appointments, and you'll notice on there the new minimum wage for student workers and substitute secretary and substitute custodian. Item number 5, co-curricular advisors and volunteers. This is where you will start to see now a breakout in our new format, where we will have 3 separate tables: staff advisors unpaid, Schedule C paid advisors, and then community volunteers. And tonight we just have 2 unpaid staff advisors who we're approving. The next item for coaches, it was explained a little bit that we have 3 assistant softball coaches now who will be sharing 2 positions. So there was one assistant coach who left and one who remained, wanted to stay full-time. The third one didn't want to do full-time, so now we have 3 assistant coaches sharing 2 of those positions at 2/3 pay each. So same amount of money, just one extra person. So you'll see 2 of them listed here, and then when we get to amendments, you'll see the third one changing from the full-time to the 2/3. 6 block stipend. This is where we have some grandfathered teachers who, when they work a 6 block And that's, so for anyone who doesn't understand that, over 2 days, our teachers, we have 4 blocks over 2 days. So if a teacher now works 3 and 3, these are ones who will get paid extra for working that 6th block instead of their duty pool. Professional development, you'll see lots of coaches training on here, some conferences. We have in number 9, a couple leaves of absences. Number 10, you'll see a student teacher for ESL teacher, and this is actually a former student of ours, so that's pretty cool. Curriculum writing, we have a bunch of those. Our usual salary guide advancements. And then we have a couple of sidebar agreements. So we have 2 with the bus drivers. One is really just formalizing what's already been in practice, where we've been incentivizing our bus drivers and our substitute bus drivers. And the second one, for the bus drivers, addresses some specific contract language regarding the number of days that must be worked prior to moving up a step on the salary guide. And then we have a couple of cleanup items on our HCEA contract. One of the things on there that I know one of the board members had some questions about, and hopefully everyone had a chance to see the responses to that, had to do with adding a girls wrestling coach. So that will be partially funded by doing away with a position that we no longer need, but there is a growing need for a girls wrestling coach because we now have 10 girls on that team, and it's been growing. And their practice and competition schedule is separate from the boys, so you really need somebody dedicated to that. A couple of the other things on there where we've clarified the tuition reimbursement process, and there were a couple of non-affiliated positions that are getting moved into the HCEA. And then there's AM, PM supervision, and a couple of amendments, and that's where you'll see that amendment for the assistant softball coach. So with that, I will move personnel items 1 through 17.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? The only thing I would like to point out, number 13 and 14, the 2 sidebars involving the Bus Drivers Association, were discussed at length in the joint transportation meeting with Flemington-Raritan District a week ago, 2 weeks ago, where our 3 board members and myself, Dr. Moore, our members who sit on JTC, who are also our operations board members, were there with the Flem-Rar members as well, and these 2 were hashed out, let's say, at length. And so those were actually adopted already by the Flemington-Raritan School District on Monday night. Any other discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Yes.
Mrs. Bloodfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Kellogg,
Yes.
Mr. Reimer,
Yes.
Mr. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Davidson,
Yes.
Mrs. Peterson,
Yes.
Mrs. Duggan,
Yes.
Mrs. Hughes.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Racism, Equity, and Diversity Committee, we don't have any action items tonight, but Mrs. Bloodfield, since Mrs. O'Donnell's not here, do you want to just report briefly on the meeting?
Sure. Yeah, we had a virtual meeting. We started out, I guess, giving me a little background on how the committee had started ad hoc and then became a permanent standing committee to develop Policy 8100, which was adopted last summer. And now the committee's efforts will be focused on implementing policy and trying to create a sense of belonging by respecting differences. Couple of the issues that we talked about. One is how to make tutorials, clubs, and sports more accessible to everyone, particularly with regard to the late bus, which I guess we only have a couple days a week, and it's at 3:45, so it's, timing doesn't always work if someone wants to be on a sports team. There's also issues that it doesn't stop everywhere, so someone who really relies on the bus transportation, it makes it very difficult in some cases to participate in everything that we have after school. And one of the things the administration might be looking at is our bell schedule and seeing if there's anything, there's certain things that can be offered during the day. Just looking for, I guess, some other creative solutions to that problem. Talked a little bit about also some of the issues with the gender-neutral bathrooms, things like there's not enough and they're too far away. And then we talked about how issues like that probably should be talked about in O&T. And just, part of things like that just become part of the long-term facilities planning. And then we had talked about at the time, the upcoming refugee book talk, which Dr. Moore already gave a very nice summary of. So that was pretty much what we talked about.
Thank you.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Davidson.
Lori, regarding bathrooms, switching to O&T, do we have an objective, a requirement, a determination of how many bathrooms distribution would be ideal? Because O&T is kind of oriented to the physical side. We would have to say, okay, where could they be put and how much would it cost? But first we'd have to know, what is the objective? What do we want to achieve? How many bathrooms where have to be moved? And then O&T would have an easier time.
I don't know that we've come up with, what there should be, but just basically saying that there's this policy, and so if there's issues and it's a facilities thing, then it's probably something to be discussed when looking at long-term facilities plans.
Right.
That's really the point of that.
Anyone else? Mrs. Kellogg, we had our first communications committee meeting ever, which was exciting. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson, Mrs. Kellogg, and Nancy Tucker, who I don't see her here tonight, but she's a part of that committee. Dr. Moore and I also attended. Again, no action items, but Mrs. Kellogg, would you like to just give a report?
Yep, so we started off with the description of the communications committee and our I guess, primarily what we're going to be doing. And we are going to review initiatives and status and recommend policy and action related to knowledge and awareness of the district's educational mission, academic programs, and school activities. The committee appraises feedback from staff, students, parents, guardians, with the goal of providing ideas and recommendations for ways the district can improve its communication with the community. I will also say that we started discussing goals, but that's a work in progress. We definitely need to come up with some specifics on how we're going to implement these policies. We also requested that Mrs. Tucker give us a debrief on exactly how the district is currently communicating, what our modes and methods are, and what we're actually attempting to communicate. So that we're looking forward to that at our next meeting.
Great. Thank you very much. Anybody have any comments? Ms. Peterson, anything to add? Okay. That concludes our committee reports. Is there any additional board business? No? Okay, then we'll move into our second residence forum. Again, 5 minutes. Please come up, state your name, residency. You'll get a 4-minute warning and then 1 minute when the 5 minutes is up. I also want to remind the board, as our first speaker is coming up, that the public always has the opportunity to email the board. It has the same effect as coming to speak to the board, so if you can't come to a meeting or choose to communicate that way, emails are disseminated amongst the entire board. If they are sent to me or sent to any board member, in fact, they will be noted on the agenda, and it is a similarly effective way to communicate with the board other than coming and speaking.
Ready? Steve Farcio, Raritan Township. As you guys know, most of you guys know, I came here on January 3rd to speak. And I left early. I wish I would have stayed, but I got several phone calls on the training that you guys had on the HIB policy, which, quite frankly, was beyond alarming, to be honest. And so I'm here. I'm sorry to break up the kumbaya that was going on here earlier, but I think it's really important that this be said. And it's a shame that the staff members, students, parents should all know what that training consisted of, and they should watch it. They should go back and watch the January 3rd training. I want to be very clear. I saw 2 hours and 1 minute and 12 seconds. The presentation was, the person who made the presentation said, quote, HIB has a huge PR problem. No, it doesn't. It does not have a PR problem. It has a manipulation problem. It has a lack of understanding problem. It's a very specific statute. And the reason why I know this is because on June 10th of 2019, I was asked by parts of the legislature to come down to Trenton to talk about this very statute because schools like Hunterdon Central are not following the policy. And now I know why, because we don't know how to actually enforce it because we don't understand it. Very alarming what I heard. So just to be clear, I also want to just, before I get into some of this other stuff, hopefully I'm keeping my own time here. At 2:06 and 32 seconds, HIB not meant to enact discipline or demonize the bully. I can't believe that that was even mentioned at this Board of Education meeting. Do you think that the hundreds of coaches in this state that have been terminated because of bogus HIB complaints, do you think they agree with that statement that was made? I can tell you the answer because I represent most of them. No. I don't know who it was. I thought it may have been you, Mr. Fowler. You asked a very good question, and it led into another question. I don't know if it was you. I knew your father, by the way. Great man. I know he passed a long time ago. Very sorry about his loss, though, because he was a good man. He was a guy that you'd run through a wall for. He was a guy that would have never put up with the stuff that's going on in this school. But I'm going to tell you, you think Steve Gibble, who got terminated by this board after 22 years, Hall of Fame coach, you think he's happy about what you guys claim that it doesn't demonize? You terminated him. And then the board in 2018, after hearing the actual evidence, decided, no, you know what? He didn't violate the HIB policy, 7-2. And the two people who voted no are two defendants in our lawsuit that continues to go on because we can't resolve it and you guys keep delaying it. That's what's going on right now. So, excuse me if I'm a little angry about what you guys claim to be training. And then I heard, and I understand your policies, I have to address it to you, Ms. Hughes. You and apparently Dr. Moore believe that you can accidentally violate the HIB policy. Come on, guys. We got brains here, right? That is the most ridiculous and offensive thing I've ever heard you say. How could you say that? The very definition requires motivation. What is motivation? Motivation is intent. You got to have intent. If you don't have intent, you got the code of conduct. I saw the cases that were listed in your training. They don't stand for what you guys think it does. It doesn't. And I know because when I went to the subcommittee in Trenton, we specifically talked about that. And they said, we have a real concern with schools who aren't understanding the intent part of the HIB policy because it was never meant to be what it's being done for. It's unbelievable. I mean, guys, please, whatever you do, you have to intentionally commit an HIB act. It is the toughest and strictest HIB law in the entire country. And you guys think you can accidentally commit an HIB violation? I'm going to tell you right now, that's emphatically false. And if you don't believe me, go to someone else. I actually, just so you know, I sent a clip of that training and just certain clips that I wanted certain attorneys to see. They were astounded by what you guys actually were being taught and what the president of the board and what your superintendent thinks. Oh yeah, you don't need intent. This law has destroyed lives. Destroyed lives. I represent probably 95% of the coaches that have been terminated on this law. And you guys think you can accidentally violate the strictest and most toughest law in the country on bullying. Bullying, by the way, is an intentional act. So I don't know what's going on here, but now I kind of understand a little bit. We got to
Thank
stop
you,
this,
Mr.
guys.
Farsi.
We
Thank
got
you.
now. Let me just ask a question. I know my time is up. Well, you have 30 minutes, right? Is it 30 minutes for public comment?
A total of 30 minutes,
Okay.
correct.
So if there's time left, I can come back up. That's my understanding.
Well, our policy says as long as it's not repetitive.
It won't be repetitive. I haven't gotten to half my stuff.
Anyone else like to speak at public comment? Was there somebody who wanted to speak? Oh, okay, no worries. That's fine. I just looked up and you were gone, so I didn't know. Come on up.
Right, so I just want to, I'm not going to
Can you
repeat
please
what I
state your
said.
name? Please state your name again for the record. And your
Steve Farcio, still Raritan Township. I'll leave you with this because I don't want to be a dead horse. I just want you to know that I know this room's filled with people who are, pro Dr. Moore, pro whatever. I just want the right thing done. And I'm going to tell you, there are a lot of people out there that they basically say to me they don't want to waste their time coming here. I still have to believe that you guys are going to do the right thing at some point. The HIB training, that's just very eye-opening to me. I thought
Mr.
for
Farsi,
sure.
I'm going to have to interrupt you if you're going to talk about.
Ms. Hughes, you're not going to interrupt me. And let me tell you why.
Mr. Farsi,
Let me tell
I
you why.
preside over
Ms.
this
Hughes,
meeting.
I'd be very careful if I were you. I'd be very
gavel, please?
careful. There's a case on this, and I'm not repeating anything. You didn't even let me speak yet.
You started going back into the HIB training, which is what you talked about in your first public comment.
And I'm getting to a different part of the training
Fine,
that I
please
haven't
move on to your-
talked about. Why don't you give me a chance? Give me a chance. I know you don't like me anymore. That's okay. Give me a chance.
Mr. Farsi, I have no personal opinion about you
Well,
whatsoever.
you've
All I'm saying
interrupted
is I'm
me.
trying to follow the rules. We
You know
have a
what?
lot. Mr. Farsi, please, okay? I'm trying to be respectful.
This is
I'm
video.
trying to be respectful, okay?
Okay.
I run this meeting on behalf of the board. We have a lot of business to do after public session, in executive session. We have administrators here, we have staff here, we have other folks who want to speak. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm trying to be respectful of everyone's time.
Okay.
We have to go into executive session, as you know, and we have probably, an hour or two more of time. We are all volunteers, so I appreciate you coming here. You are free to say what you'd like. I would just ask that you please not repeat what you said during your first statement.
Must have struck a nerve because you didn't give me a chance to speak. So.
You didn't strike any nerve.
Oh,
I'm
I
just
think I
laying
did.
out what the rules are.
I think I did. And it's very telling. But, how about I'll leave you on this since I can tell clearly what I've said is something that you guys haven't thought about. I've been a coach for 26 years, and we tell our players and we tell our kids all the time, and I tell my family all the time, you have to take accountability for your own actions. That's what we tell our kids, right? That's what you tell your students? Do you guys take accountability for your own actions? So when Dr. Moore called our boys soccer team that was in the stands racist, was that proactive or reactive? Was there an apology issued? Were you trying to manipulate the HIB policy so that you could fit in the fact that they accidentally treated someone treated them in a racist manner? Was that the point? Because that's what everybody thinks. And you know what? I'm starting to believe it. But, I went back and I watched a lot of these videos and I was trying to figure out, had I ever seen Dr. Moore accept responsibility for something that he had done that was not the right decision. I do it all the time. I tell my team all the time, you know what, that's on me, I shouldn't have done that. There's things I do in cases sometimes I shouldn't have done. Not once. I haven't, you know what, you guys, pay attention, especially the new members. Pay attention. Have you ever heard him accept responsibility for his own actions? I haven't. And you know what? The animosity here towards me is just telling, and it also explains a lot. And I'm glad that there are so many people watching this, because now they can see it. And you know what? It's only going to get worse, because I'm not going away. I'm coming back, and I'm calling you guys out on everything. So it's either, you know, maybe the systematic issue that you have is the fact that you have policies that you don't enforce on a full scale. You guys want to predetermine decisions. That's what you do. That's what's been done here for 20 years. Change it.
Thank you, Mr. Forcio.
Good evening. My name is Emily Plunkett. I live in Raritan Township. As a junior, I attend Hunterdon Central Regional High School. For the past 17 years of my life, I as a female have faced the repercussions of being a woman. I was recently objectified because of my fashion choices, which happens to a lot of the girls. I was told by a male student, and I quote, "I will give you $20 to wear an actual top and cover your cleavage. You dress like a whore and look like a slut." Then he told both my friends, and I quote, "to go back to the whorehouse and go back to Africa." I dealt with those statements and others like it every B-day for up to 2 weeks, until I got publicly humiliated in front of my friends by that student in the comments. Luckily, a DRA witnessed it, and both my friends did too. I was asked by a staff member, "Why didn't you say something sooner? If you said something sooner, it wouldn't turn into racial and nobody else would get involved." And right after I got humiliated and sexualized, I got told by a staff member, "Again, you should probably cover up." Another remark was made too, and I quote, "Maybe you just listened to the dress code, this wouldn't have happened. Your clothes are getting smaller every day." These remarks were made by adults employed at this school. As a young woman, these comments break my heart. It impacts my ability to feel comfortable in my school and reach my potential as a student. I am allowed to be concerned about what will happen next, asking myself, will this even get dealt with properly? There is a pattern in this world. When a woman expresses a concern about a male, it is brushed aside and dismissed. I should not be responsible for these predatory behaviors made by men. Dress codes represent all the way girls feel objectified, sexualized, unheard, and treated as a second-class citizen by adults in position of authority. But too often, only two categories of adults emerge: administrators pressured to enforce the school policies, and mothers complaining about the stigmatization their daughters have faced, or the detentions they have received for expressing themselves in what clothes they feel comfortable in. Where are the teachers who are ready to stick up for their students? The ones who are ready to have serious conversations changing the dress code policy? What about freedom of speech and choice? What about those who see opportunity to promote ability to think critically about cultural differences or to investigate how popular culture has affected people today? These dress codes that are being taken place in this high school that I'm attending are penalizing female sexuality. We have to uphold and be responsible for what men are having desire and impulses, which promotes rape culture. Dress codes are becoming those tools that can easily target girls in this school today and feel humiliated just like me. I'm not the only student that voices concerns about the dress codes and how it negatively impacts female students. I am simply wanting the policies that are relevant to teenage lives, flexible to meet changes in clothing, styles which value identity, expression, and gender expression. I would like to call for a committee to review and update the dress codes to review these concerns. That committee should be made of students, including me, staff, and parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Emily, I just want to say on behalf of the board, I'm sorry that you went through this. We will make sure that Dr. Moore, Mr. Brandt, and the relevant administrators are in touch, and we'll bring it to the appropriate committee. So thank you for speaking tonight. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Oops, sorry. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak tonight? Okay, with that, we're going to close residence forum, move into board comments. The only comment I'd like to make with regard to the previous speaker is I'm not sure that I spoke at all at the HIB training, and I certainly don't believe I gave my opinion on the HIB statute, but I certainly will go back and take a look at the video. I don't believe that I said that you could accidentally violate the policy, but I certainly will go back and take a look. I think you said Mrs. Hughes said that.
You guys brought it up, and she actually.
Okay. I just want to state for the record that I didn't say that because I believe it was stated by the speaker that I said that. So thank you.
Watch the video. I've watched it 5 times.
What do we have there? HIB and legal? Is that it?
HIB, legal, and, but I want to do a quick board comment as well, if there was.
Okay. Is there anybody else with board comments?
Yeah, I just want to share to Emily also, a group of people to have a conversation about the dress code and see what we need to do. That's an easy thing for us to do, and promise you that we'll do that. We've done that in the past, and it's led to some really positive changes in not just our dress code, but all kinds of policies here. So I'll make sure, and Mr. Brand, if you can just connect, then we'll talk more about that this week and absolutely start that conversation. And I extend my apologies to you as well. There's more to talk about there than just the dress code, so thank you for that. Goodness, okay.
Any other board comment? Mrs. Peterson? Oh.
Yes. Sorry, yes, I would like to thank you for coming to speak. I know it's not easy when students need to come and speak in public about a difficult situation like that, so thank you for bringing that to our attention. And then this is something that obviously I would have brought it through committee, but we're on a time schedule. I have concern about the upcoming climate survey, not the actual survey itself, but we have not given 2 weeks' notice to the parents, and that is going to put us in risk of a financial penalty from the state. Our district policy and the law states that we have to give 2 weeks' written notice.
So we just gave notice today, the survey's not being given yet.
Till the 13th and the 14th.
13th and the 14th.
Which the 2 Wednesdays from now would be the 15th. So there are concerns. I would certainly
well-
say that's close, but in the event that,
So,
you know, it's by law, so.
So I understand the concern. I will also share that, and this can be something that we can have more discussion about in student life and program or anywhere really. We offer that option and that notification to parents on a survey. We're offering that on just about every survey we're giving. And that's not a requirement under the law or the policy. And we've talked about this particularly, this is the same survey that we gave last year. We haven't interpreted this survey to trip the circuits of that policy that require that kind of notification, but we're offering that notification on opt-out as a courtesy on all of the surveys that we're giving. So I guess the answer that I'm offering to you is that, yes, you're correct. When surveys intersect with certain kinds of topics, then yes, this is required. We don't believe that this survey does, but we are offering that courtesy to parents anyway. And we may be a day or two short of the 2 weeks that would be required were this a survey that we felt fell under those categories.
I think that could be up for interpretation, and that's where we could get into trouble with that. I know that you had also mentioned that we're doing the Pride survey at the same time, I think?
No, Pride survey will be later on in the year.
Month. So yeah, this one is just, it does go into, things that could be interpreted, given the wording of this climate survey, to fall within this policy 9560. So I just think we want to be careful because it does have violations shall be subject to monetary penalties, and we know that things are getting tight right now financially for everybody. We don't want to see the district hit with a unnecessary penalty.
And I do understand and appreciate the concern, and we can talk more about that, and how we look at those requirements and what the bases are for us to look at the requirements in the way that we do. One of the things that came up last year in the conversation was by, and I don't know if it was about this survey or if it was about another, it might have been the counseling satisfaction survey, by asking a student questions about their gender identity or about their preferred pronouns. Were you asking students about their sexual behavior? And I might be paraphrasing that wording wrong as a requirement for notification, but that's what we hear about sort of most often in these surveys. And I can tell you that, looking at recent commissioners' decisions, working with board counsel, I don't believe that we're in violation of the policy. I do appreciate the concern, but we can talk more about that and how we interpret those.
Any other comments, Mrs. Peterson? Okay. Mr. Fowler?
Thank you. Just wanted to thank both of our public commenters. I want to invite you both to come back up to our microphone and continue to bring your concerns. I can't speak for the board, but as an individual on the board, one of the things I took to sit on this board is an oath to support the Constitution. The First Amendment is the right to free speech, and that's it right there. So again, I understand for both of you it was uncomfortable. Anything we can do to make it more comfortable and to welcome you and your comments, I'd at least be open to hearing. And I appreciate us being held accountable. We're here to be accountable so that we can hold the institution accountable to our future. That's why I'm here, at least. So yeah, please continue to bring the fire and put our feet to it. And I'm willing to stand the test.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. Anyone else?
So we have legal and HIB.
Yeah, so we are now going to convene into executive session to discuss HIB and HIB. Can I have a motion to convene into exec?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have no action upon return, correct?